Week 6, and now we're getting somewhere. The first installment of the DPS tiers are out, and there's a few surprises. Welcome to the DPS All Football Talk RodCast for week number 6 of the 2024 football season. Week 6, Rodney's starting to get some data. Every team has played at least 2 FBS games. Most have played 3. Some have played 4. Some have played 5 already in the first 5 weeks of the season. So we're starting to get some data. Dan DeSetto here for the DPS All Football Talk RodCast. Welcome. I'm excited. We got our first tiers out for the week. Or for the year, for 2024. And maybe some surprises on there, including who's number 1 at the top, who's in tier 1 all by themselves. We'll talk about that here in just a minute, but let's review a couple of things from last week. Let's pop up the top 25. Here it is again, the AP top 25. And the biggest thing you see right away, Alabama has taken the top spot away from Texas. I'm not exactly in agreement with that, but Alabama took the top spot away from Texas after a somewhat lackluster performance by Texas and a win against a very strong Georgia team who doesn't lose to anybody except Alabama. And Alabama, a tale of 2 games, right? Alabama jumps out to a giant lead. What was it, 30 to 3, I think, or 30 to 7? I can't remember. But Georgia comes storming back in the second half and actually takes the lead late. And you're thinking for a little bit, Alabama's going to lose this game after dominating the first, I don't know, but maybe not 30 minutes, but dominating most of the first half. And wow. Super freshman Ryan Williams bails Alabama out. Jalen Milroe played really well the whole game. He is electric with his, running. His running is electric, and his deep ball throwing is electric. Jalen Milroe, fantastic. And Ryan Williams with a circus catch and a tremendous move to get away from 2 Georgia defenders and make his way into the end zone to give the lead back to Alabama. And at Georgia comes storming right back. And maybe Alabama got a little bit lucky with a missed pass interference call and then pick off Georgia on the last play of the game. Alabama holds on for the win. Most of the people, the public side was correct. Alabama gets the win there. They take over the number 1 spot from Georgia. Texas drops down to number 2. Ohio State, another workmanlike effort to defeat Michigan State. Another, somewhat slow start, and then they just roll. Jeremiah Smith, their super freshman wide receiver. What a battle between Ryan Williams and Smith for super freshman wide receiver of the year. But Jeremiah Smith with a bunch of circus catches. Tennessee Vols sitting there at number 4 now in the top 5. And Georgia, number 5. So, what about that fiasco in Miami, right? The number 8 team in the country, Miami, absolutely escapes with their life. Virginia Tech had plenty of time for the comeback there after keeping that game close. Miami scores late, and on Virginia Tech's ensuing possession, they burn up a lot of time they shouldn't have burned up. That was a Friday night game. Hail Mary into the end zone. That, to me, looks like dual possession, possibly. Who knows what it was. It was ruled a touchdown on the field. Should have stayed a touchdown on the field, in my opinion. Somehow replay gives us a story about somebody being out of bounds, which is totally not true. If you see the back angle of there's nobody touching out of bounds until everybody's on the ground. So, so that one, I think Virginia Tech got robbed on that one. That was very clear. Who knows if it was actually a catch or not, but the ruling on the field was a catch. So, no way with the rules the way they are. If you don't have conclusive evidence, you cannot overturn that call. So there was nothing conclusive there, and you could see that from the back angle that's been shown. There's no way you can overturn that call, but they did, and Miami stays alive. It's the first time Miami has looked human this year, so they look a little bit, like Miami in that one, but they did squeak out the win against Virginia Tech, stay in the top 10. How about that top 10 Michigan team, huh? They do not look like a top 10 team, but they're winning. So Michigan still in the top 10 with only the loss to number 2 Texas as a blemish on their schedule. Minnesota gets a little bit robbed on an onside kick call, and that should have gone by way of Minnesota. I lose my bet on Michigan on that game. I'm not bitter at all. USC, okay team. Ole Miss drops out of the top 10 with a loss to Kentucky. So what do we know about Kentucky? About the same thing we know about Georgia. It's strange. And South Carolina, right? South Carolina has the ability to nearly lose to Old Dominion and then go out and beat Kentucky 31-9. Just absolutely smoke Kentucky. And that Kentucky team can get smoked 31-9 and then go out the next week and darn near beat Georgia, a top 5 team in the country who doesn't lose to anybody. And then go on and beat top 10 Ole Miss and knock them out. So big win for Kentucky, but who is it? Who's Georgia? Are they the ones that came back? Are they the ones who got down 28-0? Are they the ones who struggled to beat Kentucky and kind of were lucky to get out of there alive? Or are they the ones who whipped the heck out of my Tigers in the second half last week? So, interesting. Yeah, and Notre Dame survives against Louisville. Louisville puts up a decent showing against Notre Dame, but falls. So Notre Dame stays in the top 15. LSU looks pretty good against South Alabama offensively, and even defensively they start to pick up a little bit. Clemson does an okay job of beating Stanford, although we're going to talk a little bit more about my Tigers when we talk about the tiers coming up. Iowa State, you'll be shocked to see where they are in the tiers. Are they even in the tiers? We'll find out here in just a minute. And then, Utah takes a late loss at home in Rice-Eccles and looks uncompetitive against Arizona. Big win for Brent Brennan. Big loss for Utah. Big loss for Utah when they've got a playoff position hanging in the balance and they're the favorites. That was a huge loss for them. OU is looking out for the Red River Shootout next week. Trying to get somebody healthy on that team. So Yeah. Kansas State with a big thumping of Oklahoma State, knocking Oklahoma State out of the top 25. And Boise State continues to climb, and we welcome, first time ever, 2 teams for the first time ever in the top 25 since I've been keeping track. That's Indiana at number 23. Cignetti and all of his players from James Madison have turned Indiana into a legitimate football team. And they're number 23. People are starting to talk about, could Indiana go 11-1 this year? It's possible. And then, something that's extremely rare, we have a tie for number 25, UNLV. Who needs Sluka, their quarterback? They just dominate. UNLV has got, 2 wins against Power 4 teams in their back pocket and are ranked 25th in a tie with Texas A&M. And lucky for the AP Top 25 that Texas A&M is in the top 25. Otherwise, there would be 0 top 25 matchups on this week. So that's it for the AP Top 25. Now, how does that compare against the tiers? So let's talk about these DPS tiers. These are something that I put out every year. Pure math, right? Simple, pure, 100% math. Has nothing to do with your record, your win-loss record. First of all, right off the bat. It's not an overall ranking. It's not a best versus deserving. It is how do your statistics compare against former championship football teams? How do your statistics compare against former champion football teams? Not how does your win-loss record compare against other teams? Has nothing to do with it. It's just box score stats. And as I've mentioned before, everybody who's won a national title has been either in Tier 1, Tier 2, or Tier 3 by the end of the season. So, and nobody's come from outside of Tier 4 by week 5. So if you don't see somebody in Tier 5 by this time of the year, statistically, they're not going to win a national title. But last year, so let's talk about last year. So last year in the first tiers I put out at week 5, going into the week 6 weekend, all 4 of the eventual playoff participants were in the top 4 tiers. We were representing 1 in each tier, right? In Tier 1, we had Washington Huskies, Tier 1 at week 5 last year. Was a signal that Washington was for real and they were a good team, and they wound up going undefeated until they played Michigan in the championship game. They were in Tier 1. Tier 2, your eventual national champion, Michigan Wolverines. Remember, Michigan had a pathetic out-of-conference schedule last season, right? Remember this? Just awful. They hadn't played anybody by week 5, yet they were still already in Tier 2 last year at week 5. Already there. Texas, the Longhorns, right, who, well, it seems odd now, but back last year in week 5, we're all still doubting Texas. This is Texas team that always falls flat, always loses a game they shouldn't lose, always gets decent but net falls short. Texas was in Tier 3 last year by week 5. There were signs that Texas was fixing the things that they needed to fix to become a championship team, and those things are playing out this season, right? Texas was in Tier 3. And in Tier 4, a team who'd look really sloppy, who had a shocking game against USF, where they pulled it out 17-9 maybe last year. early in the season had very few data points of looking anything good. That was the Alabama Crimson Tide. They were in Tier 4 after the Week 5 games last year. So all 4 of your playoff participants were in the top 4, looking only at statistics, not records, not voting, not eye tests, not anything like that, simply looking at stats. So that's a little level set on the tiers going into Week 6. And here they are. So shocking. So the good news for the Tier 1 team of this year, the Tennessee Vols, all by themselves in Tier number 1. That's great news, right? I just told you that all 4 playoff participants were in Tier 1, 2, 3, and 4 last year. Well, wait a minute. In Tier 1 last year, along with Washington, were the University of Miami Hurricanes and Texas A&M Aggies, right? One of those 2 teams lost their coach a couple weeks later, right? The coach was gone. The other team almost lost their coach because of a Georgia Tech debacle, Mario Cristobal, and yeah, so it's not a guarantee. But the Tennessee Vols are your only Tier 1 team. And I told you you'd be shocked about Iowa State, where they were in the tiers. How about Tier 2? Tier 2 for Iowa State. Is that going to be true? I don't know. I don't know why the computer is so high on Iowa State. But lo and behold, they are, because they had a win against Iowa, who's a Tier 3 team this year, because they can actually play a little bit of offense, right? So, Ole Miss, good news for your fans who just lost to Kentucky. The computer likes Kentucky a little bit. They're a Tier 3 team, along with Georgia. And Ole Miss is in Tier 2. Alabama, Texas, Tennessee, all in Tier 1 and 2, along with Ohio State. So chances are pretty good that the national champion is in one of those 2 tiers. But who knows? Tier 3, even Tier 4 can provide a champion. We've never had a champion at the end of the season who was in Tier 4. But a couple of teams, like, shocking that they're in there. UCF, who just got blown off the field by Colorado, who's not listed here. Yet UCF statistically is doing things that the DPS likes compared to champion teams, but they have some big flaws, and those big flaws were exposed by Colorado last week. Somehow they're still in Tier 3. I feel like they'll drop out very soon. And Maryland, same thing for Maryland, 2 losses. Maryland, one of the big reasons Maryland is so high up in the tiers is because of a 50-7 win against Connecticut in Week 1. And we know how improved. Connecticut's the most improved by percentage team in the FBS as of the Week 5 data. Connecticut is the most improved team, and Maryland beat them 50-7. So that's how Maryland wound up in Tier 3. Indiana, congrats to you. We just talked about you. And there's the rest of your Tier 3 teams. And then all those AP Top 25 teams, we've got 12 of the AP Top 25 teams that are not in Tier 1 through 3. So these are teams that have flaws, and I want to talk about one of those teams. Unfortunately, one of them is my Clemson Tigers. I've never seen, in the years I've been doing this, I've not seen Clemson's defense ranked as low as they are right now. Clemson's defense. Now, I'm hoping that a lot of that is because we jumped out to big leads. With the exception of the Georgia game, we jumped out to big leads and started subbing, and our depth is not good on defense. but usually that's still a really bad sign. Do you know who Clemson looks like this year? Statistically, almost identical. Not quite as good on offense, but just as bad on defense. Well, 2023 LSU, 2023 USC Trojans. That's who Clemson looks like right now. Top 10 offense, bottom 80 or below 80 ranked off defense. Currently, the defense is ranked 81st in the country. For a Clemson defense, that is shocking for someone like me who's watched outstanding defensive play no matter who the competition is. Remember, these numbers are all opponent adjusted. So they're playing not good offenses and giving up gashing runs. The rush defense, 111th or something like that. Just absolutely horrible. Clemson's defense. So I'm going to be keeping a very close eye on my Clemson Tigers and see if they're this year's LSU or this year's USC. And by the way, speaking of Tier 3 USC, this is the highest I've seen USC's defense in a while. Right now, they're number 32 in defense. So very big improvement from USC on defense. Not quite as big of an improvement for LSU. They're 50-something. But USC, big improvement on defense so far. Yes, so USC, good things possibly around the corner for them. Surprisingly, you don't see South Carolina in the tiers after they thumped Kentucky. But they're not far away. They're not far away at all. South Carolina is Tier 4. So that's it for the tiers for the first week. We will keep an eye on that, but let's see if it holds that the champion at the end of the regular season is in Tier 1, Tier 2, or Tier 3. And these are statistical tiers, basically sigmas in a bell curve based on statistical comparison against former champions. So purely from box score stats. Absolutely no shenanigans going on with the tiers. Just box score stats. That's it for tiers. Let's move on to the review of last week's Rodney's performance, our computer picker. And here we go. So in the top 25 matchups, Rodney got a 2-2 record in the top 25 matchups. We already kind of went over these, but I'll just quickly say Kansas State thought they would cover. They did cover. Got the 1-point cover by Notre Dame in the Louisville game. We thought Georgia was going to get that one. You know, Rodney thought Georgia was going to take that one, and there was money on it. The check mark. The dreaded green check mark was a loss for me in the plays. And I was a little worried about that big number for Penn State against Illinois, and it turned out to be true. Illinois kept it close. Penn State won the game. So Rodney drops to 9-6, still 60% on the AP top 25 versus top 25 matchups after week 5. And on the ATS plays for week 5, we had a winning week. Yay! We finally went up. Finally got to change the ATS units for the week to a green. First time this year. 3-1-1 with wins. North Carolina beating Duke. Not beating them. Duke beat North Carolina on a last-second play. However, only beat them by 1. So the plus 2.5, we got the win on that one. Louisiana pulled off the upset against Wake Forest. Got the win there. That actually was a DPS upset call. However, we didn't bet on it. so we lost on that one. But we got the ATS victory there. And BYU with the +3 against Baylor. Baylor fought till the end, but BYU was able to get the cover on that one. Got a push on Washington and Rutgers, and for the 3-1-1 week. And as you can see, we lost some more on the for the year on the overall, down already almost 12 units already because of our unfortunate back-to-back 0-3 weeks on the money line. So we kind of knew we were going to lose that Purdue-Nebraska play. That was by rule. I have a rule that says the DPS upset calls, I have to choose the one that's the highest odds, and that was the highest odds upset call. Purdue, who fired their offensive coordinator after the game, that was the highest odds upset call, and of course it didn't come through. Purdue was actually hanging in there where they could have possibly made a play and gotten a win, but then Nebraska ripped off 14 points in about 2 seconds and put the game away, and that was it. We got the loss there. North Carolina Duke was the one we were on the right side. We were on the right side. North Carolina had that game and blew it at the end, and I lost my +111 there. So UTSA, that one was not really close, I don't think. So ECU gets the win there. 0-3, down 3 units for the week. Down another tenth of a unit because we lost the parlay, obviously. So we've been, since the beginning of the year, we've been up year to date on our money line units. We're now down 3.56 units on our money line plays, 5-10 for the season on money line upset plays, and 0-5, of course, on the parlays. And that is it for the Week 5 review. Let's move on to Week 6. All right, we're back for part 2 of the RodCast for this week, for Week 6. It is Tuesday morning. Tuesday morning is, as you know, the morning that I lock in the bets for the coming week. So I placed my bets this morning, and I really hate the slate of bets that I placed this morning. Just awful. But we'll see. I mean, I do what the computer tells me. I do what Rodney says to do. And over the course of time, that is 55% or better over the course of time. So we'll see. I mean, I just really hate all these plays this week. But here they are. So let's start with the Week 6 review with the top 25 matchups. Only one, barely, top 25 matchup this week. Texas A&M hanging on to the top 25 in a tie with UNLV. This game is not available on MyBookie to bet. MyBookie is the place where I place my bets. They don't even have a spread on this game, but it is listed as -2 on the ESPN Network's page. ESPN Bet, I believe, are the numbers they use. -2 for Texas A&M. Rodney says take Missouri on that one. Rodney's hitting at 60% this year so far on the top 25 matchups, which is pretty darn good considering these are always close games. For the normal ATS plays, another slate of games, which I can't stand. Last week, 3-1-1. As you remember, we finally had a good week. This week, Purdue. So, +14 on Purdue. Yuck. Hate it. Hate this play. Purdue offensive coordinator Graham Harrell was fired after last week's game. And who the heck is coordinating the offense? I have no clue. Purdue +14. That is also the highest odds bet, but as you can see, it doesn't have an asterisk next to it. I did not bet it because of the firing of the coach. Normally, I have to bet the highest odds play on the money line as well. The highest odds DPS upset. Have to put it in the money line plays as well. I didn't do it this week because I gave myself the grace of the fact that Graham Harrell was fired this week, and who knows who's the offensive coordinator is going to be. So let's let that, from a money line perspective, let that one settle out. North Carolina plus 2.5 after the heartbreaker last week against Duke, bouncing back to take out Pittsburgh. That's also a money line upset play. The next one I really hate, Ball State. I don't really understand why Rodney can recommend betting on Ball State. 132nd in offense, 134th in defense. That's last in the country. That is an awful football team, Ball State. But somehow he believes they'll cover the 9.5 and win outright. So asterisk on that one. Asterisk. That takes over as the new highest odds DPS play. So yuck. That's an automatic loss right there. Another one that's probably a loss, App State against Marshall. If you haven't been following, Hurricane Helene devastation in Boone. The river overflowed, took out the whole town. It is bad news in Boone, North Carolina, and as Western North Carolina. There's still people who are stranded and trapped and can't get out because the roads are washed out. They're having helicopter drops for food and drone drops and things. It's terrible out there. I spend a lot of time in that area as a hiker of the mountains. Love it up there, and I'm just heartbroken for those people in those beautiful areas of Western North Carolina devastated by the flooding. App State, their football program's probably not been paying much attention to the upcoming game with Marshall, but it is a play because it's a play, so I played it. West Virginia +4 against Oklahoma State. This is a perfect case for Mike Gundy to come and bite me in the ass right here. Terrible effort last week against Kansas State. Awful. So it would be just perfectly fitting for Mike Gundy to come out and put Oklahoma State's best effort on the board and win as favorites and cover the 4 points against West Virginia, because I have West Virginia on the money line. I also have West Virginia against the spread. So those are the plays for this week. Yuck. Don't tail any of those plays, and we'll go back afterwards and say, well, Rodney was right, or yeah, Dan was right with his human hunches. So we'll see. And then, of course, the money line plays, we already talked about it. Last week, as usual, we hit at our normal 35 to 40%, right? Last week we hit close to 35. We hit 4 of our 12 upsets last week, but of course, as Murphy's Law would dictate, I didn't pick any of those 4 upsets to be money line plays last week. So I went 0-3, and now I'm down 3.5 units on the money line. This week I didn't have as much of a choice. I only had 6 games that were called money line upsets. And so I picked 3. I had to pick the one that was the worst odds. One of them was taken out because of the fact that, offensive coordinator Graham Harrell for Purdue was fired. Took that one out. So that left me with just a few games to try. So these are the 3 games that I selected. I had to select Ball State and Western Michigan, and then I had only 2 more. I picked West Virginia, Oklahoma State, App State, Marshall. That's what we've got. I picked them based on there are differences between what Rodney says the spread is and what the actual spread is. So, if Rodney is, it's like a confidence bet, right? Basically, that says, so these were the two of these three were the high confidence bets: West Virginia, App State. So that's it for week 6. That's it. Next week we'll talk about a few things like which teams have top 25 offenses and defenses, which teams have the worst offense and defense that are in the top 25, right? Like we usually check in on that around week 6, week 7, start to check in on it because the DPS numbers start to make sense. If you look at a graph over the years, and I've done this in the past, of basically dampening a dampening situation that says weeks 1 through 5, Rodney's trying to figure out what everybody is, but by week 6, week 7, week 8, he starts to figure out what everybody is, and their rankings don't move up or down much after that. He starts to actually figure out where teams are because he has enough data. That's like, the only way I can describe it is like a dampening effect, where it's like bouncing around at the beginning, and then it's figuring out, it's converging, its convergence is coming together, and it's converging on a window that is actually correct for where a team should be. Not always perfect, but it converges on a point that's not far off. So next week we'll talk about that. Thank you all for subscribing, for liking, sharing, posting, comments, whatever you do. Thank you all. I appreciate everything you do. And we will see you next week. Dan DeSetto for the All Football Talk, the DPS All Football Talk RodCast. See you in week 7.